IUPR Bible Radio is a teaching platform. Our teachings are for educational purposes only. We teach from both testaments in belief that God never changed his nature, and he never did, and still is the God of judgment. Sunday so-called Christians teach a changing God, but Scripture and New Testament verses disagree with their theory, because that's what it is. We in our podcast intend to prove that the error of the Christians is intentional, whether it be doctrine, false feast that cannot be proven in the Bible, false feasts that cannot be proven in the Bible, or any other action that is intended to deceive the true children of Israel. Because that is what Christianity was created for, to deceive the true children. We are not about senseless debates, which will not change minds, but cause more confusion. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good, and that which is good is the law. Deuteronomy 6:17-18, Romans 7:12. Both of these verses prove that that which is good is the law. So I want to go to the book of Jeremiah 10:1. Now, before we begin, I want to make a comment. We're approaching this in a different manner, because I'm not just going to focus on Christmas Day. I'm going to focus on all of them, because there is a word you need to look for as we go into this. So, if you will, get your pens, paper, or just however you copy the verses down. We want you to have the verses so you will know. Because as we get into the New Testament, you're going to see the severity of it. It did matter. I'm not just going to tell you what we're going to go into, but I'm going to show you that it does matter. It does matter. The book of Jeremiah 10:1. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. So hear the word of the Lord. And look at this. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for heathen are dismayed at them. So learn not the way of the heathen. Watch this. For the customs of the people are vain. I want to stop right there. It says the customs of the people are vain. Vain. Now, when you look at the customs, it's not just talking about Christmas. It's talking about all of these customs that they celebrate, whether it's the Christmas tree, the rabbit and the eggs, the jack-o'-lantern, the New Year's, the birthday, and the baby day, the baby shower. All these things are the custom of heathens. Because you can't, if you just take a look at this. Birthdays, for instance, birthdays. Now, if I go to Genesis, I'm going to come back here. If I go to the book of Genesis, Genesis 40, verse 20. And it came to pass the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast. He made a feast. Pharaoh's birthday. Notice, the heathen keep birthdays. See, birthday is right here. Pharaoh's birthday. That he made a feast unto all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. So we can see early that the Gentiles celebrated the day of their birth. It never was an order from God to do that. That's why when we go to Mark, I want you to look at this. Mark 6. Mark 6. Real quick. Mark 6. It isn't just about Christmas. It's all of them. Watch this. Mark 6, verse 21. And when a convenient day was come, that Herod on his birthday, notice, another Gentile on his birthday made a supper to his lords, high captains, and chief estates of Galilee. So notice who's celebrating the birthdays. Gentiles. You never will find where Israelites celebrated birthdays. Only the heathen, the Gentiles, celebrated birthdays. And when you go back to the book of Job, see, I'm going to tell you something, brothers and sisters. The funny thing about Christians is they think that they could just say, no, it's not what they're saying. It's not what they're saying. It's not what they're saying. It's not true. God is not going to do anything to us if we celebrate birthdays. That's the concern. But that's not what the Bible says. So I want to get Job 3:1 first. Job 3:1. It says, after this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. His day. Cursed his day. Cursed his day. The Christians know what we're talking about. Cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish when I was born. So his day was his birthday. Let the day perish wherein I was born. Notice it didn't say birthday. It just called it his day. And his day was the day he was born. And the night in which it was said, there is a man child conceived. So his day was the day he was born. So when we go back to Job chapter 1, it's funny. Job chapter 1. Verse 4. Pay attention. Job chapter 1 and 4. And his sons went and feasted. Feasted. There's that feast again. Notice when birthdays came, there was a feast. So you look at this. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day. His day was his birthday. Watch this. And sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them, like it was in Genesis 40 and 20. And Mark 6:21. Look at this. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, purified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned. What was their sin? What was their sin according to context? Everyone feasting on their day. That was the sin. There's nothing else here. There is nothing else here. When the Bible says, Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, what was it? And cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. What was their sin? Feasting on their day. It was never biblical or under any law or any circumstance where you were to celebrate your own day of birth. It wasn't there, but the heathens did it. The heathens celebrated their birthdays. So watch this. Let's go back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah 10 and verse 3. For the customs of the people are vain. Vain. One of the vain customs of the heathen was birthdays. Because Israelites didn't celebrate their birthdays. You never will read it. But the Christians, they say, well, we don't believe that. We don't think that. It doesn't matter what they think. What matters is they cannot prove what we prove, making them liars. See, the Bible, you're supposed to prove all things. And if I'm going to keep a birthday, it'll be because God commanded, or it'll be because it showed. I'm not going to keep it because I want to and think, oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Yes, there is, and we're going to prove it. If it wasn't, when we get to the New Testament, you're going to see. For the customs of the people are vain. Stop, are vain. I want to stay right there. Let's get the book of 2 Kings. 2 Kings. Chapter 17. 2 Kings chapter 17. We're going to start in verse 13. I want you to pay attention. It says, "Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways and keep my commandments." So turn ye from the evil of your ways and keep my laws and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. So turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, statutes, according to the law which I gave to your fathers. I didn't give the law to all fathers. I gave the law to your fathers. Deuteronomy, we're coming back here. Deuteronomy 32. Pay attention. Deuteronomy 32. I want you to read this real quick with me. Deuteronomy 32. And verse 45. "And Moses made an end of speaking all these words to all Israel." So Moses was speaking all these words to all Israel, not all nations, all Israel. Pay attention. "And he said unto them, set your hearts unto all the words which I testify among you this day, which ye shall command your children to observe to do all the words of this law." Here we go. "For it is not a vain thing for you, because it is your life." To keep the law is not a vain thing for Israel, but for the Gentile it would be. It doesn't matter if the Gentile keep the law. It was not a vain thing for Israel to keep the law, because it is your life, Israel's life. "And through this thing ye shall prolong your days in the land, whether ye go over Jordan to possess it." So it wasn't a vain thing for Israel to keep the law. For them. So keeping the law separated you from vanity. It was not a vain thing for Israel to keep it, but it was their life, not the nation's life. It was their life. And if they did that thing, they would prolong their days in the land. So watch. I want to go back to Jeremiah 2 Kings. I'm sorry. 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17. Verse 13. "Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets." Look at this. "Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks." Hardened their necks. Like to the neck of their fathers that did not believe in the Lord their God. See, brothers and sisters, look at this. Because they hardened their hearts, because they hardened their necks, they did not believe in the Lord their God. See, because they would not hear and harden their necks. Hear what? Hear what? The law. The law. Like the necks of their fathers, and did not believe in the Lord their God. See, because they didn't keep the commandments, they didn't believe in God. Meaning, a sinner is an unbeliever. That's what we're proving to you. See, when you broke God's law, you didn't believe in the Lord your God, according to the verse. But I want to get to this. Verse 15. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity. They followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do the like. So Israel followed vanity, which the heathens were a part of, and became vain. What does it mean, became vain? Became like the heathen. Became like the Gentiles. When they began to follow the worship of the Gentiles, they became like the Gentiles. Pay attention. They went after the foolishness, the vanity of the heathen. Now, when it says followed vanity, what is vanity? What is vanity? Proverbs chapter 22. What is vanity? Proverbs 22, verse 8. It says, he that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity. See, that is what vanity consists of. Sin. So if you soweth sin, you're going to reap vanity. Vanity. And the rod of his anger shall fail. So vanity comes from sin. Again, vanity comes from sin. Again, vanity, which is another word for vain, comes from sin. Iniquity is sin. Psalms 32 and 5. So when we go back, because I want you to look at this, when we go back to 2 Kings 17, I'm doing this for a reason this way. 2 Kings 17 and verse 15. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed sin. They followed the sins of the heathen. Watch this. They followed sin and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them. So when they follow vanity, they follow the sins of the heathen. They follow the sins of the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do the like. This was in order. So I want to go back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 3. For the customs of the people are vain. Now we know one of the customs of the heathen, because remember, this is about the heathen. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs, which are the ways or the manners of the people, are sin. Vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with an axe. Look at this. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest. Up in your top left-hand corner, where would this tree come from? The forest. Wait a minute. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman. With an axe. With an axe, he chops it down. You've seen it. People know what this is talking about, but pay attention. They deck it with silver and with gold. Again, they fasten it with nails and with hammers that it could not move. They prop it up. They prop it up like in the left-hand corner. This is talking about the evergreen tree being decorated. The tree that they cut out of the forest is going to be the evergreen tree. And it says, even it says, and they deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not, that it stands up. Watch this. They are upright as the palm tree, because they make sure the tree stands up straight, but speak not. They must needs to be born. They had to be carried out of the forest, because they cannot go. They cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also it is in them to do good. No concern to worry about what that is. So one of the customs of the people that was vain or was sin was they cut down a tree out of the forest, deck it with silver and with gold, and fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. This is talking about the Christmas tree, but I list them all. All of these are vanities, because you won't find them in the Bible. You won't find them. But look at the top left-hand corner. That's exactly what you see. A tree out the forest, fastened upright, decorated with ornaments. It was real silver and gold back in the days, but now it's just a bunch of whatever they call it. I don't know. It's been so long since I had a tree where I lived. Long time. Half my life. So I don't even know what they're called anymore. Like decorations, whatever. But notice that this is a vain custom. A custom of sin. Vain is sin. And we want to show you, before we go, we're gonna absolutely show you, positively show you that vain or vanity is sin. Look of 1 Kings 16. I just want to take you here real quick. 1 Kings 16:13. It says, for all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah his son, by which they sinned, and by which they made Israel to sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their vanities. The vanities were sins. Vanities were sins. If you can even go, I think that they have what are the 7 deadly sins? One of the 7 deadly sins is vanity, because vanity is sin. That's why it says in Proverbs 38 and 9. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 8 and 9. It says, remove far from me vanity and lies. What's vanity? Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me. Watch this. Lest I be full and deny thee. If I'm full, I'm going to deny you and say, who is the Lord? Because I'm rich. Or lest I be poor and steal. Steal, watch this, steal. See, brothers and sisters, to steal was part of the 10. That's why we showed you the 10. Lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal, which is breaking the 10th commandment, the 10 commandments, and take the name of my God in vain. If I steal, I take God's name in vain. If I break the law, I take his name in vain. That's what we're talking about. So we got to understand by logic what vanity and vain would mean. And it's sin. So the worships, watch this. Jeremiah, because I want you to see this. Jeremiah 10. Jeremiah 10. For the customs of the people are sin. So if you keep the customs of the Gentiles, you're in sin. Not going to play with the Christians. We're not going to play with them. If you keep the customs that are not in the Bible, you are in sin. Because the customs of the people are sin. Watch this. I'm going to show you. The book of Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse 3. It says, Israel was holiness unto the Lord, and the firstfruits of his increase. All that devour him shall offend. Evil shall come upon them, saith the Lord. Watch this. It says, Hear ye the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord God, what sin, what iniquity have your fathers found in me, that they are gone far from me and have walked after vanity? Iniquity is vanity. That they have walked after vanity and are become vain. Are become vain. When this is the second time you've seen this, you've seen it in 2 Kings 17:15. When they follow the way of the heathen, Israel became vain. You see it here. God is telling them, what iniquity have you found in me, that you've gone far from me and have walked after vanity and are become vain? When it says walk after vanity, what does that mean? They walked after the ways of the heathen and became vain. They were vain now. When it says they became vain, they were in sin. When they kept the ways of the heathen, they were in sin with the heathen. They were in sin with that group of people. Because we're going to show you the book of Acts. The book of Acts. Now here's the act. Now I decided to do this this way because I'm going to go back and forth to it. This is I told you it wouldn't be the traditional way that I would do it. But I want to go back and look at an example of idolatry. Now, Paul and Barnabas, they're among Gentiles. Now, I want you to look at this very carefully. Look at this very carefully. Understand very carefully what we're about to read. Acts 14:11. It says, And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voice, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, the gods are come down to us in the likeness of men. And they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius, because he was chief speaker. Then the priest of Jupiter, watch this, the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garland into the gates, and would have done sacrifice with the people. Pay attention now. Which when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of, they rent their clothes and ran in among the people, crying out and saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? These things. We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God. Wait a minute. Paul and them taught them to turn from the vanities to the living God. If it was okay for people to keep the vanities of the other nations, why did Paul try to turn them from them? And preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God. If you go, look, we're going to come back here. If you're going to turn from vanities, again, let's go back. Look at this. Slow it down. 1 Kings again. 16. That's why we say, First Kings 16:13. For all the sins of Baasha and the sins of Elah, his son, by which they sinned. Look at this, sin. And by which they made Israel to sin, in provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their vanities. Vanities, which means multiple vanities, multiple sins. They made Israel to sin with their vanities. So when they were in vanities, they were in sin. No way around it. When they kept the vain worships of the heathen, they were in sin. Again, if you keep worships that cannot be proven in the Bible, you are in sin. Do not let these foolish pastors trick you, brothers and sisters. These ignorant pork chop eating pastors, their brain is scrambled, fried, and died to the side, with these Negroes following them. When you were in vanities, you were in sin. You keep the vanities of the heathen, you're in sin. Look what the Bible is proving. So when we go back to the book of Acts 14, we know the book of Acts 14. Verse 15. And saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God. If you're turning from vanities to the living God, what does that mean? Think about it, brothers and sisters. When it says you shall turn from these vanities unto the living God, that means you shall turn from the worship of heathens, which keeps you in sin, unto the living God. So you have to turn unto the living God from sin. If you're going to turn to God from sin, what does that mean, to turn to God? If you're going to turn to God from sin, how would you turn to him? The book of Nehemiah 1 and 9. See, Christianity was meant to kill. It was meant to set up as many of us in time in history to the day to fail. Nehemiah 1:9. But I'm going to go up to verse 8. Remember, I beseech thee the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if you transgress, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. Now, when he scattered them abroad among the nations, what happened? What happened? Let's go back. Deuteronomy 28. What happened when he scattered us among the nations? Deuteronomy 28 and verse 64. And the Lord shall scatter you among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods. Serve other gods. Serve other gods. Vanity, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. So when God scattered them, they would serve the gods of the Gentiles. When God scattered them, they would worship the God of the Gentiles. Wood and stone idols. And it's back to 2 Kings 17. I'm sorry about that. 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17. We're going to show you 17, verse 8. I just want to read verse 8. I read verse 13, 4 through 15, but I want to read verse 8. I'll read verse 7. I'm sorry. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and feared other gods. Look at this. And walked in the statutes of the heathen. So the statutes of the heathen would be the customs of the heathen. See, the heathen had their own statutes. They had their own worships. Birthdays was part of it. Christmas, the evergreen tree decorated, was part of it. And they walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. They started to follow the statutes. So the heathen have their own statutes. The heathen have their own manner. The heathen have their own customs. And their sin. Sin. But I'm going to go back. I want to go back. I need to go back here, because I don't want you to forget the thought. I'm rambling, but I don't want you to forget the thought. Acts 14:15, once again, it says, and saying, sirs, why do ye these things? We are also men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God. Let's go back. Turn from these vanities. Let's go back to Nehemiah. That's why I wanted to go here, because I didn't want you to forget the thought. It says, turn to God. Turn from these sins unto the living God. How would they turn to God? We're going to show you. Nehemiah 1:8, remember, I beseech thee the word that thou commandest thy servant Moses, saying, if ye transgress, if you break my law, I will scatter you abroad among the nations. But if ye turn unto me, if you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, though there were of you cast out unto the uttermost part of heaven, yet I will gather them from thence and will bring them unto the place that I have chosen to set my name there. When you turn to God, you're keeping his commandments. When you're turning to God, you're keeping the law. But if you turn unto me and keep my commandments and do them, that is how you turn to God. That's why in 2 Samuel, yes, sir, 2 Samuel, I want you to pay attention. 2 Samuel 23, verse 1. Now these be the last words of David. David, the son of Jesse, said, and the man who was raised up on high, the anointed of the God of Jacob, and the sweet psalmist of Israel said, the Spirit of the Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue. The Spirit of the Lord spake by me. So when the Spirit of the Lord spake by David, everything David wrote down, the Lord inspired him to write. That's why it says, the God of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spake to me. See, everything that David wrote was from the Spirit of the Lord. Now I want you to check this out. Psalms 119. I want you to check this out. Psalms 119. I want you to, because this is not talking about David here. This is Christ through David. It says this, verse 77. Let thy tender mercies come unto me, that I may live, for thy law is my delight. Let the proud be ashamed, for they dealt perversely with me without a cause. Who did they do this with? Christ. Pay attention. But I will meditate in thy precepts. Let those that fear thee turn unto me. Who is the me that they're going to turn unto? Because this is a prophecy. Who is the me that they're going to turn unto? Christ. And let those that have known, let me read this over because I butchered it. Let those that fear thee turn unto me, and those that have known thy testimonies. Those that have known the testimonies, those that will fear the Lord will turn unto him. But also, there's others that are going to turn. Because those that feared the Lord would turn to Christ. Those that fear him now. But what about those that didn't fear him? What about those that didn't fear him? We're reading about them now. So there was two different groups. So when you are turning to God, it is because you have understood the testimonies. The testimonies have to be presented. So when we go back to the book of Acts, understand what it means to turn to God. Acts chapter 14. Verse 15. And saying, sirs, why do ye these things? Question mark. We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God. If it was okay for you to worship in vanity, why are they trying to turn them from vanity? Because the apostles understood they had to turn people from the sins of the heathen. It was not okay for you to worship as the heathen according to the Bible, because they're telling them to turn from that. Like we teach people to turn from Christmas, Easter, Baby Day, Dog Day. We are teaching you to turn from worships that are not proven to be kept in the Bible. Won't find Christmas, won't find them keeping Easter, won't find them Halloween, keeping out. You won't find a New Year's birthday. You won't find Israel doing this, but the heathen do this. The heathen. the Gentiles. This is their worship, not the worship of the text. And Paul and Barnabas are teaching them to turn from these Gentile sins to the living God. Turn from them. Stop doing them. Because there's danger in you doing it. People that keep Christmas, Easter, these days, they are in danger. And that's what people need to know. They think, oh, it's safe. We can do it. God's not going to do nothing to us. That is what your slave master told you when you didn't know nothing. And now they still don't know nothing. What's the difference between this picture where they couldn't read and this picture when they won't read? No difference at all. See, this is the effect of slavery and Jim Crow and other different types of methods to take away the strength of a people. That's why it says in 1 Thessalonians. One, I think. 1 Thessalonians 1. And what do I want to start at? Verse 8. It says, "For from you sounded out the word of the Lord, not only in Macedonia and Achaia, but also in every place your faith to Godward is spread abroad. So we need not to speak anything." Look at this. "For they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and how ye turned to God from idols." You turned to God from idols to serve the living God, or to serve the living and true God. Excuse my reading today, brothers and sisters. I'm off. I'm excited, I guess. How ye turned to God from idols. Okay, so when you were worshiping these idols, what were you? When you were worshiping these idols, what were you? 1 Corinthians 12. That's why I say, but before we do that, I want to go to Romans. The book of Romans chapter. Romans, and it's very important. The book of Romans chapter, I think 9 and verse 3. "For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh." You know, Christians, they like to skip this part because they know that they cannot prove that nations called other nations brethren. No, that's crap. A white man, a black man, a Chinese man, they were not brethren according to the Bible. Your brethren was your own people, point blank. It's at least 20 verses in the Bible to confirm this without a doubt. I don't care where we go. The brethren was your own people. So Paul's brethren, his kinsmen according to the flesh, were Israelites, not everybody else. The Christians have nothing on this. Paul's brethren and his kinsmen according to the flesh. Now remember, it's the book of Romans now. And he's telling these specific group of Romans that his brethren, his kinsmen according to the flesh, were Israelites. So going to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Verse 1. "Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant." Brethren, his brethren were Israelites in Corinth. "Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led." So when they worshiped, when his brethren, Paul's brethren, worshiped dumb idols, they were Gentiles. When they worshiped dumb idols, which is also vanity, they were Gentiles. What if I was to ask you, where can we go in the Old Testament to show this? Because remember, ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols. When you were in idolatry, you were Gentiles. What two verses can we go to show without the shadow of a doubt what Paul is talking about here? We're going to show you the book of 2 Kings 17. We're getting straight to the verses. 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17 verse 15. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant which he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain. When it says and became vain, you just saw it. They were Gentiles. When they became vain, they became as Gentiles. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the Gentiles, the heathen, which were round about them, concerning whom the Lord hath charged them that they should not do like them. When Israel became vain because they followed sin, they became as the Gentiles. They became vain. They became a vain people, like the Gentiles were a vain people. Back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah chapter 2, we're going to just getting straight to the verse. Jeremiah 2, verse 5. Thus saith the Lord, what iniquity have your fathers found in me? So what iniquity have your fathers found in me, that they are gone far from me? See, they left far from him and walked after vanity and become vain. When they walked after sin, they became like the Gentiles, which were sinners. They were no longer relevant when they followed after vanity, which is a result of sin. So when they became vain, Jeremiah. That's why he says in Jeremiah 14. Then we're going to go back to 1 Corinthians. Jeremiah 14. It's mentioned over and over. That's why it says, verse 21, do not abhor us for thy name's sake. Do not disgrace the throne of thy glory. Remember, break not thy covenant with us. Are there any among the vanities of the Gentiles that can cause rain? See, the Gentiles, what they were in was vanities, sins. The vanities of the Gentiles. See, the vanities always belonged to the other nations that were not in the covenant. Are there any among the vanities of the Gentiles? Vanities of the Gentiles. So now we know that the vanity came from the Gentiles. Are there any among the vanities of the Gentiles that can cause rain? Question mark. Or can the heavens give showers? Are not thou he, O Lord our God? Therefore we will wait upon thee, for thou hast made all these things. So it says, are there any among the vanities of the Gentiles? Look at that. Are there any among the vanities of the Gentiles? The book of Acts 13. Again, Acts 14. Acts 14. Verse 15. And saying, Sirs, why do ye these things? Question mark. We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities. Who did the vanities belong to? The Gentiles, unto the living God. So to turn from the vanities, which was birthdays and upright palm trees that were upright evergreen trees that were decorated, no matter what they say, Christmas, Easter, baby, they were vanities. The custom of the people were vain, Jeremiah 10:3. That's vanities. So when he says to turn from these vanities, who were in the vanities? Gentiles. So these men were worshiping as the Gentiles. So the Bible teaches that they're to turn from these vanities to the living God, not stay in them. It is not okay to stay in vain worships and think God is going to still pass it by or let you get away with that. No, that's a lie. They were teaching them to turn from these sins that were of the Gentiles, not to stay in them. Any pastor, any of these false teachers tell you there's nothing wrong with keeping Christmas, they are against the Bible. According to the text, they turned them from vanity. Not let them stay in it. So when we go back to 1 Corinthians 12. 1 Corinthians 12. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 1. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. Ye know that ye were Gentiles. When ye were, let me read it. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. When the brethren worshipped idols, they were Gentiles, meaning they became vain. When they were worshiping, his brethren were Israelites. The Christian can do nothing about it. Paul's brethren was Israelites. Romans 9:3-4. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, or had became vain, when you were carried unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. So when you were in idolatry, you were Gentiles, or became vain like they were. So we go back to, wait a minute. We go back to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians 1. Verse 4. Now, who is the letter to that they call Thessalonians? Knowing brethren, beloved. Look at that. The Thessalonians are brethren. So these brethren were Jews in Thessalonica. And it supports this. It supports it. When we go to first, watch this, the book of Acts. Acts 22. Acts 22:3, where Paul says, I am verily a man which am a Jew born in Tarsus. Paul is a Jew. Paul is a Jew. Now watch this. Acts 17:1. Now when they had passed through Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where was a synagogue of the Jews. Synagogue of the Jews. And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 days reasoned with them out of the scriptures. So there was Jews. Paul was a Jew in Thessalonica. So Jews being in Thessalonica, as it says here, and Paul being a Jew from Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, shows that the brethren that he was writing to were those Jews in Thessalonica. But see what the Christians will do. What the Christians will do is say, hey, well, if they're Jews in Thessalonica, they were Jews in Thessalonica. But wait. Paul says, I am verily a man which am a Jew born in Tarsus. But when we go to Acts 2:25, and as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman? Even though Paul was a Jew, he was a Roman by citizenship. Just like those Jews were Thessalonians by citizenship. They were born there. There was no such thing as a Thessalonian Jew or a Roman Jew. They were Jews born there. And where they were born, they took on that name, like Paul did here. The man asked him, and the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? He said, yea. Paul just told us he was a Roman because he was born in a place where the Romans ruled. You cannot be a Jew born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia. You cannot be a Jew born in and then go down here to Acts. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? And he said, yeah. So he was a Roman. He was a Jew born in Rome, making him a Roman. So when we go back to 1 Thessalonians, look who the letter is to. Everybody want to talk about this, talk about that. But when we look who look, it says, knowing, brethren, beloved, your election of God. So these brethren are Jews in Thessalonica. And since they were born in Thessalonica, that made them Thessalonians. So he's writing to the brethren again. Brethren. That's why in verse 9, for they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had among or unto you. The you is the brethren. And how ye turned to God from idols. And how ye turned to God from sins to serve the living God, to serve the living and true God. So they turned them from idols to serve God. You could not serve God in idolatry. And how ye turned to God from idols, because idols made them Gentiles. When they worshiped other gods, they became vain. And what did Paul call them? Gentiles. He called his own brethren Gentiles because they were worshiping other idols, other gods. And how ye turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. So you had to turn from idolatry. You had to turn from vanity to serve God. You could not stay keeping these worships, which are vanity, and call yourself worshiping God. See, but that's what they do. That's what the Christians do. Oh, we can worship God any kind of way. Not according to this. Paul, you're seeing they turned from idolatry, which is vanity, which is sin, to serve God. They turned from that sin to serve him. That's why in Ephesians 4, it says this. This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk. And the vanity of their mind. And the vanity. So the Gentiles walked after vanity. Again, the Old Testament and the New Testament say the same thing. None of these things Israel kept as a people. All of these things are of the Gentiles, and their vanity. Vanity. And if you keep these worships today, you're still made vain. It didn't change. The cross didn't change this. This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the sin of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their hearts. Anybody that keep Easter, Christmas, baby day, all those false days, have had their understanding darkened, and they're going to be alienated from the life of God. Alienated from the life of God. We're going to show you what it means to be alienated from the life of God. Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, man. We got you. We got you. Matthew chapter 7, verse 21. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. So you have to do the will. Do the will. Do is an act. Do is a work. So this is a will you have to do. Well, what will are we supposed to do? The book of Psalms. Psalms 40. Psalms 40. Verse 7. Then I said, Lo, I come. In the volume of the book, it is written of me. I delight to do thy will, O my God. Yea, thy law is within my heart. The will that you have to do is to keep the law. That's the will you have to do. The will you have to do is to keep the law. But the Christians say, no, see, they'll skip this. See, we tell you, it's about verse. Let's go to this verse. Let's go to that. So the Christians come up with their slickness and say, no. John 6:40 says, and this is the will of him that sent me, that everyone which seeth the Son and believeth on him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. So it says, everyone that believeth on the Son. That is his will now, that we believe on the Son. That is God's will now, that we believe on the Son. But pay attention. Let's go to John 9. I'm going to show you, see, John 9. The book of John chapter 9. Verse 30. It says, the man answered and said unto them, why herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. For we know that God heareth not sinners, but if a man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will. Stop. And we know God heareth not sinners. 1 John 3 and 4. 1 John 3, verse 4. 1 John 3 and 4. Whosoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is transgression of the law. Sin is transgression of the law. So if I go back to John 9. John 9. Verse 31. Now we know that God heareth not sinners. Those are transgressors of the law. The sinners are the transgressors of his law. But on the contrary, if any man be a worshiper of God and doeth his will. So a worshiper of God does the will. You know what else this verse says? That a sinner does not do the will. Those that transgress the law, they don't do the will. That is what this verse is saying. God heareth not sinners, but if any man be a worshiper of God and do his will, the worshiper doth the will, but the sinner does not. That's why God doesn't hear him. The sinner, the transgressor of the law, they don't do his will. So a sinner, they don't do the will of God. A sinner doesn't do the will of God. A sinner, they don't do his will. That's according to this verse. This isn't a misinterpretation. A sinner, they don't do the will. Right away, we need to understand this. So when we go back, hold on, Matthew chapter 7. Verse 21. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Is a sinner doing the will? No. Chapter and verse. A sinner is not doing the will, and you're going to see that a sinner doesn't do the will. Many will say unto me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. See, this is what they're going to tell him. But watch. Then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. The workers of iniquity, which were sinners, were not doing the will. That's that easy. He, again, depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Ye workers of iniquity. The book of Psalms, we're going to go to it. The book of Psalms chapter 32. I want to show you what exactly iniquity is for you that don't know. Iniquity. Look at this. Iniquity. David writes, I acknowledge my sin unto thee, and my iniquity have I not hid. I said, I will confess my transgressions unto the Lord, and thou forgavest the iniquity of my sin. So iniquity is sin. Iniquity is sin. So when we go back to the book of Matthew, iniquity is sin, man. The book of Matthew chapter 7. In verse 21, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Watch this. Just drop down. For many will say unto me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works. Watch this. And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work sin. So a sinner was not doing the will of the Father which is in heaven, because it proves it here. It also proves to do the will is to keep the law. That is the will you must do, Psalms 40 and 8. The will you must do is keep the law. And because those that sinned didn't do the will, they were told to depart from Christ. They were told to depart from him. Christ says, get the hell away from me. Those that stayed in their sins and did not do the will were rejected. You think you could worship God in sin and call yourself a worshiper? That's not what the Bible says. I cannot keep Easter, Christmas, baby day, dog day, cat day, bird day, doctrines of vanities of the heathen, and then I'm going to call myself a worshiper of God. Nothing wrong with it. That's not what the book says. notice, depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. Back to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1. And verse 9. It says, for they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and how ye turned to God from idols. And how ye turned to God from idols, sins, vanities, to serve the living and true God. So in order to serve God, you had to turn from idols. You had to turn from vanity. Where else does it say that? Where else does it say that? Back to the book of Acts. Christians are not going to sit here and tell us that you can worship God any kind of way. Show me where Christmas is no. Christmas is vanity. But watch. And says, sirs, why do ye these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities. Christmas, if you don't understand, Christmas is and we're telling you this. When we say it's undocumented as a worship, there's nobody that kept it. No one in this book that was from Israel kept anything like Christmas as a worship. It was not done. None of these worships were done by the Israelites. None of them. And seeing that Paul and them preached that they should turn from the vanities, which were sins, which were of the heathen, the Gentiles, to the living God, you had to turn from them to the living God. And when you turned from your sins, which were vanities, which the Gentiles created, to the living God, back to 1 Thessalonians. Paul's writing to his brethren at Thessalonica, 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 9. For they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and how ye turn to God from idols, from vanity, which is caused by the Gentiles, to serve the living and true God. So you had to turn from idols. Why? Because when you worship idols, you were Gentiles. You became vain to serve the living God. Meaning you cannot serve the living God in idolatry. You cannot keep Christmas and call yourself worshiping God. No, you're not. You're in the vanity of the Gentiles. And we're going to show you again with another verse, as we showed you in Matthew 7. What we just showed you, brothers and sisters, in Matthew 7 is God rejects those that are not doing the will. He will reject you like he's going to reject them. That's why it says, watch. 1 Thessalonians. We're letting you see this. For they themselves show of us what manner of entering in we had unto you, and how ye turned to God from idols, from sins, from vanity, or vanities. That's the same thing as idols. To serve the living and true God, and to wait for his Son from heaven. Wait a minute. This is not what I want. Is this what I want? And to wait from his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, even the Messiah, which delivered us, which were the brethren, from the wrath to come. See, there is a wrath to come. See, they turned to God from idolatry to serve the living and true God, and to wait on his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, even the Messiah, which delivered us from the wrath to come. Because there is wrath coming on those that are in idolatry or in vanity. That's why, again, when it says in the book of, the book of Ephesians, I got to go back there. Ephesians chapter 4. See, these Christians think you can do what you want and God is going to take it. No, you're going to be sent off into a bad situation. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, and the vanity, because that's who create the vanity. That's who the vanity belongs to, them, in the vanity of their mind, having their understanding darkened. They never understood, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their hearts. See, alienated from a life of God is when Christ says, get ye from me, ye workers of iniquity. I never knew you. That is what it's like to be alienated from the life of God. When Christ rejects them for not doing the will, they are rejected. Rejected. That's why in 1 Corinthians, Paul is warning the people. 1 Corinthians 10. I'm just going to go 1 Corinthians 10. In verse 20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God. Devils. Gentiles now. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You can't do them both. You can't call yourself drinking at the Lord's table and the devil's table. The devil's table. Who are these devils? The Gentiles in verse 20. If you want to keep it in its cultural context, the Gentiles were the devils. You cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and the table of devils. And the table of devils have created these, because these are unprovable worships. They cannot prove these worships. So these are of the Gentiles. These worships are of the Gentiles. All of these feasts, false, fake. That's why it says in Jonah, the book of Jonah, Jonah 2:8. Jonah 2:8. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. If you observe lying vanities which are caused by the Gentiles, you forsake your own mercy. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for you. You cannot keep the vanities of Gentiles, like these days here, and think you're going to escape. You're not. You're going to pay for keeping these worships. Our people are going to pay for keeping the worships of the Caucasian man, because he's that Gentile. He's that heathen that created it. Point blank. Easy to see. If you observe lying vanities, you forsake your own mercy. So when we go to Matthew 15, Matthew 15, Matthew 15. In verse 8. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Remember, their heart is far from me. Their heart is far from me. Go back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 2. Verse 4. Hear ye the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, what iniquity have your fathers found in me, that they are gone far from me? Far from me. And have walked after vanity and become vain. When you were far from the Lord, it is because you were walking in sin. And became vain. That they are gone far from me and have walked after vanity. The reason why they were far from the Lord is because they walked in sin. And Christ is going to say the same thing in Matthew. Matthew 15. Look at that. Far from me, are gone far from me. Far. Matthew 15. Verse 8. This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Look at this. But in vain do they worship me. Vanity. Teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. The commandments of men is these right here. The commandments of men are also this. When it says doctrines and commandments of men, we're going to show you this. Here's the doctrines and commandments of men. The book of 2 Kings. It says the same thing here. The same thing here. But in vain do they worship me. Watch. In vain do they worship me. Why? And walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel. The statutes of the heathen. The statutes of the heathen are the commandments of men and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. When it says walk in the statutes of the heathen, let's go right back to Matthew 15. Matthew 15. In verse 9. But in vain they do worship me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. The commandments of men are the commandments of the heathen. Men. See, the doctrines and the commandments of men were vain. Vain. It was happening in the day of Christ. The people were in vanity, and they had to turn from that vanity to the living God. Couldn't stay in it. They had to turn from these vanities. And as we told you, when you go back to Ephesians, know that this is going to happen. Brothers and sisters, know that this is going to happen. Ephesians 4. Because the Christians, they think we're playing here. The book of Ephesians chapter 4. Verse 18. Having their understanding darkened. Why? Because they walk after the Gentiles and their vanities, which is sin. having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. They're alienated from the life of God. If you are walking in the vanity of the Gentiles, you're going to be alienated from the life of God, meaning it is not okay to keep Easter, Christmas, baby day, dog day, cat day, bird day, because you're going to be alienated from God, which is rejected, as it says in Matthew 7, verse 23. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity, which is sin. I never knew you. So those that are keeping these days of our people will be rejected, and they will die. Our people that think they can keep these things and not be alienated and not be rejected, that's a lie. That's why Paul encouraged them to turn from vanities to the living God. Turn, Acts 14:15. They taught them to turn from those sins of the heathen. Turn. This is a fact. Your enemy will teach you that you can do these vanities and God is still with you. Nothing's going to happen. But that's a lie. You're reading. Those that keep these vanities are going to be rejected. And with that, brothers and sisters, all praises to the Most High. I'm your host, the Apostle Reuben of IUPR Bible Radio, podcasting out of Little Rock, Arkansas. The Bible has to be proven. You cannot be keeping Easter, Christmas, baby day, dog day, cat day, bird day, vanities of the heathen, and think you're going to escape. That's not what the Bible says. You must turn. And we must get our people to turn from vanities to the living God. And to turn unto him is to keep the law. It's evident. All praise to the Most High, brothers and sisters. Be back with you on the Sabbath, which is in a couple of days. One love and peace. All praises.